So in this video I want to discuss the 1970s, and I've been wanting to do this video for a while, and I just want to teach the 1970s from the international policies perspective and during Nixon's presidency specifically. Later on I'll probably go through Jimmy Carter and the other presidents during the 1970s as well, but I want to focus on Nixon first because he was the beginning president in the 1970s. So Nixon focuses mainly on international policies rather than domestic issues, although he is famously known for the Watergate scandal, which was his biggest domestic issue and his biggest failure as a president. He did contribute much to the Cold War tensions and international affairs as well. Under President Nixon, he had a Secretary of State named Henry Kissinger, like this. Henry Kissinger. And under Henry Kissinger, he was able to use diplomatic relations in order to attempt peace talks with North Vietnam and with China and with Russia as well. So at first we see that the Vietnam War was still going on, and Nixon didn't want it to continue. Lyndon Johnson was the president that mainly escalated the war and kept continuing, but Nixon saw that anti-war protests were commencing and that it would be a strategic of value to make the world more peaceful rather than compete with the Soviet Union in direct confrontation or with communist nations in intervention. So basically he commenced a process called Vietnamization, in which through this Vietnamization he was able to pull out troops from Vietnam. Vietnamization. He was able to pull out troops from Vietnam this way to make it more a peaceful environment and pull out with peace and honor, quote unquote. And then basically he also passed the Nixon Doctrine. The Nixon Doctrine, which the Nixon Doctrine basically stated to the United States Asian allies that they would support their Asian allies, but without extensive use of ground forces, because Nixon kind of watched during Eisenhower years and other years how the Vietnam War was not really working out well for the United States, and the policy for the United States during the Cold War was to get involved and contain the communism every time, and they supported dictators as well that they wouldn't normally support, but they supported because he wasn't a communist. So they basically created a big mess through this Cold War, and a big mess was seen because of the Bay of Pigs invasion from Kennedy. So all these big disasters are basically because they want to contain communism, and they look at communism as one brand of red, not even different aspects of communism, not like Marx-Leninism or anything like that, just plain communism, that it's scary for the United States because they don't want people turning communist, and then all this other stuff will happen. So then in 1970, Nixon used U.S. ground forces to destroy Vietnamese bases in Cambodia. He got involved in Cambodia in order to stop Vietnam in that area. It's kind of ironic that after he would provide the Nixon Doctrine and Vietnamization, that he would still attack Vietnam bases. But this was in Cambodia, and what was going on in Cambodia was Pol Pot and other issues that they had. And then this led to a nationwide protest on college campuses, and 4 youths were killed by National Guard troops at Kent State in Ohio, and 2 blacks were killed in Jackson State in Mississippi. So So that's pretty significant that the National Guard shot some college students that were protesting. And then, in reaction, the U.S. voted for the repeal of the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. So Gulf of Tonkin was repealed. Gulf of Tonkin. And the Gulf of Tonkin was basically the excuse that got them into the Vietnam War. And this was repealed by the U.S. Senate. Not the House, but the Senate. And then there was also a massacre that was well known in the village of My Lai, and women and children were killed by U.S. troops, most likely to prevent any uprising or any further action done by North Vietnamese against U.S. troops. It was more of a preemptive strike, if anything. But these were released by the Pentagon Papers, and the Pentagon Papers are this group of it's the group of papers that the government kept secret in order to prevent any outbreak of like leaking or anti-government protest, because the US basically did things that they shouldn't have done, and they know well, but they kept it secret. Pentagon Papers. But it was released through Daniel Ellsberg. He was the former defense he was a former Defense Department analyst. So Daniel Ellsberg. And after that, Kissinger was used to negotiate with North Vietnam, and the foreign minister was Le Duc Tho, not very important. And at first, North Vietnam failed to compromise with the peace that the U.S. was trying to get, and then Nixon ordered a massive bombing of North Vietnam, and it was actually the largest and most amount of bombing that they've ever had during the war. And then North Vietnam agreed to an armistice, and the Paris Accords promised a ceasefire and free elections in Vietnam. This did not end the war. It really didn't. It was just an armistice that they wouldn't fight. And then this Nixon also established a détente, which is spelled like this. Détente, which was basically the ceasing of Cold War tensions. It was a reduction so that they wouldn't be going at it so heavily in international areas in the international arena. So Nixon used the Chinese-Russian rivalry because the Chinese communism and Russian communism are very different. So he visited Mao Zedong and made use of that in order to reduce tensions. He also initiated the SALT treaties, and that they were the strategic arms limitation talks. And the Soviet Union was freezed on the number of ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads that they could have. So this basically just was another act of détente that they could reduce. And the strategic talks are spelled like this, SALT. And then we also had going on before this in the 1967, there was the six-day war between Egyptians, Syrians, and they all attacked Israel at once when it finally became the state after World War II. So they all attacked Israel at once because they saw it as some sort of intrusion into their business. So during that time period, the United States supported Israel to defend against all of the Egyptians and Syrians. In reaction to that, the Egyptians and Syrians are known, and Middle East are known for having oil. They cut off oil with the United States, and there was an oil embargo by OPEC. OPEC. So basically, this impacted the American economy and made it more inflated. And as later we'll see that Nixon had domestic issues, and then Jimmy Carter had to deal with his own issues during the time period. And the Middle East will be the main source of conflict during this time period. But that's basically it for the 1970s of Nixon and his international policies. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask.